Tonight, a triple stabbing at the University of Waterloo. Police are calling a senseless act of hate. The suspected motive of a terrifying attack.
To purposely target that subject matter of gender identity and gender expression.
And backlash over a communication breakdown.
Nothing about the incident was made clear.
Agony after a man is acquitted in a drunk driving crash that killed two young sisters.
I think about the girls every single day.
The ruling and a family's relentless grief. Plus, remembering celebrated sex educator Sue Johanson.
For some people, it is a real turn-on.
The Canadian trailblazer who turned taboo topics into teachable moments.
Gotta have this humongous...
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. There are dramatic new details tonight in a terrifying triple stabbing at one of Canada's largest universities. Police said today they believe this man, a former student and recent University of Waterloo graduate, carried out a targeted, hate-motivated attack. They say he walked into the gender studies class, asked the 38-year-old professor about the subject, then attacked her with two large knives and stabbed two students as they frantically raced to get out. It all happened during Pride Month and at a time when hate crimes across the country are on the rise. As CTV's Heather Butts reports, the grief is coupled with anger on campus about why students were not alerted about the horrific rampage sooner.
A moment of silence at the University of Waterloo for the three people stabbed in what police are calling an act of hate, as officers share new details about the man now facing multiple charges.
Investigators have reason to believe that this was a planned and targeted attack motivated by hate related to gender expression and gender identity.
40 students were in the classroom when police say the accused, 24-year-old Giovanni Villalba Ailman, entered the room and confirmed with the professor it was a gender studies class. That's when the international student who graduated in April began stabbing people, sending the professor, Katie Fulfer, to hospital, along with two students, one male and one female, who were stabbed as people tried to intervene or escape. Police say they were on scene in 3 minutes.
Initially, the accused had posed to be a victim. However, officers quickly identified him and placed him under arrest once he was identified based on the description provided.
But there is frustration over a lack of communication.
Nothing about the incident was made clear. And yeah, we honestly just feel like more could have been done.
With many saying they didn't receive an alert despite a test of the university system earlier in the day.
Had I been on campus yesterday, I usually am in my office by around 4 p.m., still on campus before I go home for the day. I would have had no idea.
The latest numbers show reported hate crimes were up 27%. Reports involving sexual orientation rose by 63%.
I am always extremely interested in situations like this. What was he reading? What was he watching? And because I think that answers the question of ultimately who put these ideas in his head that led him to go and stab people.
The accused remains in custody tonight. The university says it will be flying the pride flag until the end of July in a show of solidarity and support. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. Toronto police have revealed the identity of a young girl whose remains were discovered more than a year ago.
I can now identify this little girl as Navia Tucker.
She was just shy of her 5th birthday when her body was found in a construction site dumpster. Police say they received a tip from the public and notified the girl's mother. So far, no arrests have been made. There was an outpouring of grief and fury inside a Manitoba courtroom today after a man accused of drunk driving was found not guilty in a collision that left 2 young girls dead. He says he wasn't behind the wheel, but the only other man in that vehicle has since died. CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashan was there for the ruling.
The emotion poured out of Dauphins Courthouse as the man accused of driving drunk and killing 2 young sisters was found not guilty.
We're profoundly disappointed in this verdict. We know that there was DNA evidence on that airbag. He's guilty.
The accused, Jack Winters, said he wasn't driving when he and a friend blew through a stop sign and hit another vehicle. Both men were drunk. The girls in the other truck died. Oksana was 6 and had just started grade school, and her sister Quinn was just 4. In her decision, Justice Sandra Zinchuk said, "It's not my role to determine who was the driver. It's my job to decide if the Crown has proven he was the driver." Both men were found outside the vehicle. Evidence did show Winters' DNA on the driver's airbag, but he claimed he crawled across from the passenger seat to get out. The other man's DNA was not found on the driver's airbag. The passenger side airbag did not deploy. When the judge read her decision not guilty, the courtroom erupted. Family and friends pointing at Winters, calling him a murderer. And outside the courtroom doors, the girl's mother collapsed in tears.
We got a life sentence instantly, no questions asked. The girls were given a life sentence. There's no justice in the justice system.
Minutes after the decision, this image was shared on Snapchat from an account some say belonged to Winters, with the words, "All I do is win, baby, victory." CTV News has not been able to confirm the post came from Winters. For a grieving family, it's just misery. There's no decision yet on an appeal. As the 4th anniversary of their deaths approaches, the splash park named after the young sisters is open.
That's about the only comfort a person's been getting from all of this.
The girls, honored by their family forever, will also be remembered by other children each summer to come. Jill Makashon, CTV News, Dauphin, Manitoba.
To another legal decision now from the highest court in the United States. The Supreme Court struck down race-based admissions programs at 2 prominent universities, including Harvard, ruling their efforts to create diverse campuses were unconstitutional. CTV's Adrian Gobriel on the reaction and the potential ripple effects here in Canada.
Our unity is our strength. Diversity is our power.
Protests in the streets of the U.S. Capitol.
Today, the Supreme Court got it wrong.
At the center of the polarizing decision, the Race Conscious Students Administration's program used at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, also known as Affirmative Action, which for decades has been a tool to create a more diverse student population at American post-secondary institutions.
Affirmative Action uplifts our communities and encourages our communities to dream about attending these colleges.
Their personality score is sort of biased against Asian Americans.
Today, a bitterly divided U.S. Supreme Court ruling that it's unconstitutional to consider race as a determining factor in college admissions.
And I strongly disagree with the court's decision.
U.S. President Joe Biden calling on schools to remain committed to diversity under a new standard. Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy posting that the Supreme Court just ruled that no American should be denied educational opportunities because of race.
I do not agree with the argument that affirmative action is discrimination against white students.
Affirmative action is used in admissions to some Canadian law, medical, and business schools.
Is Canadian society immune to a decision like this from the U.S. Supreme Court?
It has the potential to fuel this belief among a small number, but meaningful numbers of white Canadians, that white people are under threat by a society that is racially diverse.
While not used as widely here at Canadian universities, affirmative action is protected under Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, meaning any institution is legally allowed to put their own policies in place. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Toronto.
Poor air quality has forced Montreal to cancel this weekend's Canada Day fireworks as wildfire smoke continues to spread throughout North America. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on the human toll and the financial one.
Murky, hazy skies dulling the hot summer sun have returned to more than 100 million Americans today. The air quality so bad, more than a dozen states have issued special alerts. In Pittsburgh, where code red air quality is in effect, the smoky air forced a 45-minute delay to a Major League Baseball game.
When you breathe in air from wildfires, what very often ends up happening is not only are you inhaling ash and particles, but you're inhaling chemicals as well.
The hazardous air drifting into the United States is coming from Canada, where more than 500 wildfires are currently burning.
We're kind of at the mercy of the weatherman.
Paul Schnurr has been on the front lines in Nova Scotia, working weeks straight to help stop the fires.
When the fire is burning itself, you're feeling the heat. You're always trying to gauge how hot it is, because at some point it just isn't safe to be in front of the fire anymore.
Environmental economist Dave Sawyer has been studying the health impacts of the smoke-related air quality and estimates health costs in Ontario alone have already topped $1.3 billion.
There's some big eye-popping numbers and a lot of adverse health outcomes that are happening and likely to happen in the future.
The immediate future for Ottawa is a worsening situation. The capital's air set to become the worst in the country.
In Ottawa, we've seen and continue to see exposure levels that are off the chart.
With months still remaining in what's already been called Canada's worst wildfire season ever, many experts are encouraging Canadians to get into the habit of checking the air quality index daily and adjusting their activities accordingly. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
One of the most common artificial sweeteners used in everything from diet drinks to yogurt to chewing gum is set to be declared a possible cancer risk by the World Health Organization next month. That's according to Reuters. More than 6,000 food products contain aspartame, which has been allowed in Canada since 1981. But there are still questions about how much a person can safely consume and the level of risk. Google became the latest tech giant today, pledging to pull Canadian news links from its powerful search engine, joining Meta, the owner of Facebook, which also said it will block Canadian news. The move is in response to a recent law requiring them to compensate media organizations for stories that appear on their platforms. CTV's Kevin Gallagher on the clash.
The search for the latest news on Google could soon only link to international sources, as the web giant's parent company Alphabet says it will be removing links to Canadian news now that the Online News Act Bill C-18 has become law and remains unworkable.
It's bad for the company because its search features in Canada and Google News won't be as good. It's clearly bad for Canadian news outlets.
Meta, Facebook's parent company, already promised to bar Canadian news links in protest when the bill received royal assent last week. The law will force social media companies to pay Canadian news organizations, including CTV News, for links posted and shared on their sites. Over the next 6 months, the government plans to negotiate a regulatory framework with the Silicon Valley-based behemoths.
I'm asking them to keep discussing with us, see how we can move forward, and I think there's positive ways to do it.
2 years ago, Facebook blocked news in Australia, objecting to a similar law there.
Well, Facebook has refriended Australia.
Legislators made changes, and Meta and Alphabet negotiated funding deals with news outlets, a result Canadian organizations are hoping for.
And they warned us this would happen. They said, listen, they're going to threaten to block, they'll likely block, and eventually there'll be a compromise.
Google argues it's already helping Canadian journalism, linking to more than 3.6 billion articles last year, web traffic valued at $250 million. Despite this, many Canadian media outlets are struggling financially.
The problem, though, is that increased reach has never translated into increased revenue.
This battle between the government and social media titans is being watched around the world as countries like the US and the UK are considering similar legislation, Omar.
All right, Kevin, thanks. Chaos in Baghdad today after hundreds briefly stormed the Swedish embassy to protest the burning of the Quran in Sweden. Demonstrators kicked off the emblem from the diplomatic building to condemn the burning, which took place outside a mosque in Stockholm yesterday on one of the holiest days in Islam. The man who requested a permit for the protest identified himself as an Iraqi refugee. The protest was approved because a Swedish court ruled banning it would violate freedom of speech. The incident has drawn condemnation from several Muslim-majority countries, including Turkey, a NATO member, which has say over whether Sweden can also become a member. Coming up, calls for calm in France. The crackdown as new clashes erupt over a deadly police shooting. Plus, a deep dive on a special delivery 3 decades in the making. Two Canadian Navy ships are joining a NATO mission to hunt for sea mines in northern European waters.
This deployment demonstrates Canada's ongoing commitment to NATO's high readiness
The ships will leave from Halifax on Monday. In France, violent clashes and curfews mark the third day since a teenager was shot and killed by a police officer. Over 300 people have been arrested, and that anger that started in a Paris suburb is spreading. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin reports.
The French government vowed to restore peace, deploying 40,000 police officers, shutting down some commuter lines, imposing curfew. All this aimed at containing anger continuing to spill onto streets. Racism within police ranks kills, she says. In the Paris suburb of Nanterre, a march was held in memory of the teenager known only as Naed, the 17-year-old of Moroccan-Algerian descent whose shooting at point-blank range by police at a traffic stop sparked this unrest. Today, France's top prosecutor concluded conditions for the legal use of the weapon were not met. He announced the officer is under investigation for voluntary homicide. Still, the officer's detention did little to quell protest. The shooting resembles an execution, says Tracy Ladji of France's SOS Racism. In the face of this, we can't simply call for things to calm down. Protesters demand an overhaul of a law allowing police to deploy their weapons more frequently during traffic stops. Advocates in Canada, too, have been pointing to similar issues for years. Alain Babineau is a former RCMP officer.
There's a persistent culture of denial, first of all, that discrimination is at the root of racial profiling.
French President Emmanuel Macron called the shooting inexcusable, but also said attacks against symbols of the Republic were absolutely unjustifiable. Since Tuesday, 170 officers have been injured. Protesters have targeted police stations, town halls, schools. This comes after years of anger simmering in the suburbs of Paris over poverty and social inequities. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
Still ahead, a national chief removed. An inside look at how RoseAnne Archibald was voted out. A team from the University of Alberta says it's found at least 88 more possible unmarked graves near a former residential school in northern Alberta. Using ground-penetrating radar, they surveyed 4,500 square meters of land at St. Bruno's boarding school in a hamlet about 300 kilometers northwest of Edmonton. The community has yet to decide their next steps to confirm the graves. The organization representing more than 600 First Nations is leaderless tonight, a day after its first female national chief was ousted in an unprecedented vote. RoseAnne Archibald did not comment on her removal today, but CTV's Judy Trinh spoke to insiders who did.
So Miigwech, everyone, Miigwech Regional Chiefs.
Less than 3 months ago, former National Chief RoseAnne Archibald appeared to have the support of the Assembly of First Nations.
I'll continue to advocate with you to support your plans for progress, just as you have done for me.
But instead of having her back, more than 70% of the AFN's 231 chiefs voted to remove her.
It seems that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg in her removal. And I'm sad to see her go. I'm sad to see the first female First Nations leader be ousted in this way.
The motion to remove Archibald was put forward by 2 female chiefs from Manitoba and Ontario and came after a third-party investigation revealed Archibald harassed and retaliated against a handful of employees. The former national chief did not respond to interview requests.
We need healing.
Chief Dylan Whiteduck cast a ballot for Archibald in 2021, but says he can no longer support her.
The investigation report was conclusive in the fact that there was some damages. You just can't have that in a national organization like that.
Others say Archibald was pushed out because she wanted to reform the organization and weed out what she viewed as corruption and toxicity.
It's made a toxic situation even worse. The regional chiefs are now going to put someone in charge who is favorable to their interests. And the hard questions that RoseAnne Archibald, former National Chief Archibald, were asking will never be answered now.
In the interim, the Assembly of First Nations will name a temporary replacement. But the position of National Chief won't be filled until December, when a new election is called. Judy Trinh, CTV News, Ottawa.
A message in a bottle written in 1988 by a Newfoundland girl looking for a pen pal has been discovered by a diver in Norway.
I was just in shock. I couldn't believe it after all these years, really.
That's Jennifer Boudreau, who tossed the bottle into the Atlantic Ocean 35 years ago. It took just an hour for the diver's girlfriend to find her on Facebook.
My sister-in-law is from Halifax, so I sent the picture to her and she just said, the East Coast is really small. I bet we can find her.
The letter will now be mailed the usual way back to St. John's, where Jennifer plans to frame it. Amazing. After the break.
Hello and welcome to Talk Sex.
Remembering Sue Johanson, the Canadian who took the stigma out of sex ed. Generations of Canadians and Americans knew Sue Johanson as a trailblazer for sex education, tackling taboo topics and shattering stereotypes. The celebrated educator died at the age of 93, but as CTV's Heather Wright explains, she leaves behind a unique legacy.
Welcome to the Sunday Night Sex Show.
When it came to sex, there was nothing Sue Johanson wasn't comfortable talking about.
You can fool around. Yeah. You can do everything else. You can have a marvelous time.
A nurse by training, Johanson rose to fame in the 1990s with her no-nonsense, straight talk about sex.
You lost your virginity.
Yeah, about 7 months ago.
Yes.
First on a radio call-in show.
For some people, it is a real turn-on.
Then on television in Canada and later the United States.
Bigger is not better.
She just wanted to teach sexual health, and she did that with humor and love.
Sue's daughter Jane says her mom never set out to be a sex educator, but when one of Jane's friends got pregnant as a teen, they turned to Sue.
She could not tell her parents, so my mom just sat her down and started talking to her and then realized, I'm good at this.
Sue started a birth control clinic in a Toronto high school, then began teaching students.
I'm not a threat. I'm not seen as somebody who is being coy, manipulative, or titillating. I can laugh about sex and get away with it because at my age, what else do you do with sex? Okay, let's get on it now.
Listeners trusted Sue with intimate and personal questions. She gave them advice they often couldn't find anywhere else.
It was incredibly revolutionary for a woman who was of her age, who looked the way she did, to be talking so frankly and without shame and without judgment.
Sue Johanson died yesterday at the age of 93. She was a member of the Order of Canada, a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She empowered millions, making uncomfortable topics.
Hello. Okay. Oh, I lost you.
A little easier to talk about. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
Great smile and great laugh. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. John Ehrlichman will be here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.